If you or someone you know is struggling with alcoholism or addiction, do not hesitate to reach out for help. You can find numerous free resources on our website, thebeginagainpodcast.com, and there are tons of resources and support networks available online, in person, or just a phone call away. You don't have to face this challenge alone. Welcome to the Begin Again podcast. I'm your host, Gary Menkes. On the Begin Again podcast, we delve into the inspiring journeys of individuals who have overcome alcoholism and addiction and emerged as true trailblazers in entrepreneurship, business, sports, and beyond. Through authentic, uplifting, and profound conversations with our guests, we aim to shatter the stigma surrounding addiction and demonstrate that recovery can be a catalyst for remarkable success, strength, and resilience. We firmly believe that by listening to these accounts, you will be empowered to unlock your own potential, instigate positive change in your life, and contribute to the creation of a better world. So, get ready to be inspired and embark on your own personal journey of growth with the Begin Again podcast. Welcome back to the Begin Again podcast. I'm your host, Gary Menkes, and joining the show today is Aaron Gleadow, also known as Detox Junkie. As he put it, when he finally made it through the gates of detox and treatment, he felt he had absolutely nothing left in him. Sunken and bloodshot eyes, broken heart, and tears streaming down his face and his soul, he told them that he would do anything they suggested if it would get him clean and sober. He was powerless, and he turned his will and life over to their care. Treatment and detox not only saved his life, but he was given the tools, support, love, and compassion he needed to learn to live life. And he uses these tools every single day. And today he's recovering out loud to help those still suffering in silence. And it is a pleasure to have you on here, Aaron. Thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, Gary, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I know, interestingly enough, you mentioned, when I went into treatment, I'd do anything they said. And I remember the day I first walked in there, I actually told them, you tell me to sit up top of a tree, I'll do anything. I'll dig a hole. Yeah, I was in it 100%. But thanks. It's great to be here today, Gary.
No, I love that. That's what changed my recovery as well. I had, it was the moment I kind of surrendered and I gave up and, I started listening to all the suggestions that the people had been telling me. Like I struggled. I was in and out for 4 years before I actually got sober. I went to rehab in 2002. My sober date's 2006, just to give you an idea. And for those 4 years, it was a total battle. But when I threw my hands up and I really surrendered, I did everything totally different that I had been doing the 4 years prior. And I just, whatever they told me to do, I did it. And, I'm going on 17 plus years and my life's been changed. So as yours has, so tell us, where are you coming from? Where are you from?
Yeah. So I live in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. I'd like to hear you say that 3 times fast, but I'm smack in the middle of the country, basically in the prairies. So I'm right above Montana, essentially, or that type of area. I grew up actually on the west coast of British Columbia in a little coastal town called Seashelt. So I grew up with the mountains in my backyard and the ocean in my front yard. And that's where I spent most of my life until about 12 years ago when I moved to Saskatoon. So this is where I am now.
Awesome. And how was it like, growing up? What led you to us being on this podcast now? Tell us about that.
Well, that's a complicated story. Let's get right into it.
Let's do it. Let's get there.
I was thinking about this the other day. I grew up in a small coastal town. I was the youngest of 3 kids. My brother and sister were both, a few years older than me. So by the time I was kind of in grade 8 or the first year of really junior high or high school, as it was, my sister was in grade 12. My brother was already out of the house. And I was this kid that was really out on my own. I was very independent from a very young age. One of my first sayings to my parents actually was, buy me self. I said that when I was 3 years old. I would say, buy me self, and push them away. And that independence actually created a bit of isolation around me later in life, and we'll get into that. But as a kid, I always felt different. I always felt like something wasn't quite right. I always felt that I perceived the world differently, and I always felt alone in my thoughts and feelings. And later in life, in my adult life, it turns out, I got diagnosed with moderate severe ADHD combined. And that plays into it for sure. But I never really felt like I fit in. And this was a real internal feeling. A lot of how I felt about myself and a lot of the things that led to my addiction were feelings that I actually put upon me. And it's really interesting to say that because the perception of the world didn't feel comfortable to me, or my perception of the world. And instead of saying, okay, there's something going on here, I would say there's something wrong with me. And I did that from a very, very early age. The first time I ever drank was, I was about 15 years old or so. And so not super old, but I was at a friend's place down at the beach, and we, filled up tumblers full of his parents' liquor cabinet. And I downed that. And honestly, Gary, it was that moment I knew it was for me. Booze was like, it was like a ton of bricks hit me. And I was like, this right here, hands down. Yeah. And I was smashed, I was drinking and I got drunk and I threw up and all that terrible stuff of teenagers and stuff. But it didn't deter me. It was like, yep. Let's do that again, know?
Yeah. That's the mind of an alcoholic, right? We find it. And I found it really early too. I think my first drink, I was probably 10 or 11, but I started really getting after like around those years, 15, 16 years old. And, we put ourselves in awful spots, throwing up, sick, and we can't wait to do it again the very same night. Right. And that's, I think the difference of a kid experimenting when they're 16 years old and a kid who, you maybe want to keep an eye on. And it's funny, I come from, my mom's one of 10 and big family. I have 7 uncles. And even when I was young, like they were like, we got to watch out for him. I'm the first grandchild on my mom's side too. So very proud first grandchild, but even like early on, they're like, we got to watch this guy. Like, he's got a little different twinkle in his eye, if you will. And lo and behold, they were right. But they didn't know the extent of it, but so sorry, I didn't mean to keep going. So keep going. So you're 16, you find yourself, right? You find alcohol, you start finding yourself.
Yeah, man. Like in an instant. Yeah. As soon as that liquor hit my lips, it was like, okay, it's go time. That really started things off for me. My brother and sister, like I said, they had left the house and, I'm smack in the middle of high school trying to figure out my way. I was doing fairly well in school and whatnot up until about grade 10 or something. But then I just really didn't have any desire to continue down that road. All I was keyed on was the next weekend, the next party, what was going to be happening. My grades started slipping. I was incredibly athletic. My athleticism started slipping, dropped out of sports. And slowly but surely, those A's and B's I would normally get, or those high marks, started turning into C's, D's, F's, incompletes, that type of thing throughout grade 11, 10. And then in grade 12, we hit a bit of a catalyst. I was alone in the house, with my parents. And one day my dad sat me down and he said, Aaron, and he didn't know the extent of my addiction. I was hiding it. I was hiding everything I was doing as most teenagers do, but he knew something was wrong. And interestingly enough, he said, why don't you, I was very independent. Like I said, he said, why don't you take off to Europe and see, maybe find yourself or go traveling. I ended up dropping out of grade 12 and flying to Amsterdam at 17 years old. So,
yeah.
Yeah. So I ended up being in Europe for 10 months. And that's the first time I actually, and so the picture on Detox Junkie that you see, that cover shot there, that's me at 17 years old lying in a field in Israel. And a British friend of mine who's actually a follower on Detox Junkie, Dave Ducher, he took that photo. And yeah, that was the first time in my life people approached me about my drinking. I was 17, I was traveling, and in my head, I was a young kid partying it up and living the best life, backpacking through Europe and then the Middle East as well. But even my peers started making comments of, you gotta curb this, man. And this is traveling. Like, I'm sitting on Mediterranean beaches drinking with travelers and they're telling me to curb it.
Right.
Like, there's gotta be an issue there for that to come up in that setting. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And a young man, right? Yeah, that's a young man. I mean, first of all, it sounds like an adventure. You go across the globe, you're in Amsterdam, you're in the Middle East. I mean, you're telling me this. I'm like, man, that sounds like I could romanticize that. And I could picture, I could picture myself being on one of those beaches and, being just a total, I'm speaking for myself, a total disaster. Right. And people, tourists go, oh man, what is this guy doing? And he's 17 years old. So, But 17, I did something kind of similar, not across the world, but I went to Key West, Florida. I went to Key West, Florida in spring break, my first year of college. And I was like, this is where I want to be. This is a party town. And I moved there a few months later, and I spent the year there too. And that ramped up my my addiction and my alcoholism for sure, because it was just pedal to the metal pretty much 24/7. And that picture in Detox Junkie is a really cool picture. So we will get to how to find you, but that people will see that picture. It is a really cool picture. So you're over there, you're 17, and the red flags are being tossed in your face even at that age, right? And they're telling you, hey, heads up here. You got to tamp things back.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because I didn't listen to it at all. I was just like, yeah, whatever. And so I turned 18 and I was kind of winding down on the amount of time I was going to spend in Europe. But by the end of my trip there, I was actually, I had no money left, and I was living on a boat in Eilat in the Red Sea. And I was working as a crew on this boat. And so I slept in the hold of the boat, and it was like 40, so over 90 degrees in the hold of the boat there. I mean, it's smoking hot. And so I'd sleep down there, and then I'd get up and help out with the boat, and then party all night with the other travelers. So yeah, it was a good time in some regards. Like, in all honesty, it was an incredible trip, but it was also really the pinnacle. It was the starting point of my addiction. Because when I got back to Canada and I actually kind of tried to reassimilate myself into normal life, I was only 18 years old. My friends had just graduated high school, and they were going off to college, university, looking for their first jobs and what have you. And I came back with this travel experience and this sort of wild, globe-trotting, hippie trippy sort of attitude, West Coast. I just want to hang on beaches and sail and surf and drink and party. And again, it didn't quite fit with where all my friends were. Yes, once in a while it'd be cool on weekends or what have you, but they were all moving already, even at that age of 19, starting to move more into, more responsible sort of pathways. Sure. Whereas I just wanted to rip the lid off things. So I actually moved to Toronto when I was 19 from Vancouver, and started working in bars and clubs, because why not, right? That's a great place to...
Yeah, you're talking about, I thought I was going to be a career bartender when I was 18, 19 years old. And I started down that path, and I was a bartender. And back to Key West, talk about like really, great dreams of a young man. Like, I was like, I'm going to be a professional bartender. I'm going to bartend in New York and Montauk in the summers, and I'm going to go down to Key West in the winters. And I'm going to bartend there, and I'm going to be this like professional partier. So I totally relate to your mindset and where you are, a young man. And same with you, with me, is my friends all, are off to college. They're starting to become responsible. A little bit later, starting to do adult things, starting to become adult men. And I was just still stuck in this, like, I wanted to party. And I was really, really stuck. And I think that affected my mindset too, and my self-esteem and my confidence, where I saw people starting to even, start families, have real jobs. And I'm still kind of banging around bartending with no direction, getting in trouble, just the same. That, certainly looking back, that messed me up for a while too. Actually, it took me, I probably not until I got sober that I actually kind of overcame all that stuff. So you're in Toronto, and you're in the bar scene, right? And you're in the club scene. And so you're right where you're supposed to be at this point. And me too. I there was a lot of darkness for sure, but I had a lot of fun out there too. And I got some of the stories to back them up, but that's for another show.
Absolutely.
But yeah. So you're in Toronto, you're in the scene, and you're in that industry on top of it. So where do you go from there?
Well, I'll fast forward a little bit here. So I was with, as 19, I had a girlfriend, and we were living downtown Toronto. And once again, and this is a pattern that started popping up throughout my entire adult life, is when people got close to me, they started being concerned with my drinking. And so, of course, my friends and my girlfriend at the time started being concerned with my drinking. So 19 years old in downtown Toronto, working at these major clubs and bars and stuff, that was the first time I walked into the rooms. My addiction from the moment it was like a full go to the first time I was in the rooms was short. It was about 2.5 years. And it was bam, in the rooms for the first time. I knew that I couldn't stop by that point. I knew that I was seeking alcohol and drugs to cover up something completely else. And, it's interesting. I get asked about my drug use, and we can talk about DOC or whatever, but like, I ended up later at the end of my active addiction. I popped a lot of pills and prescription stuff, but throughout all this partying and stuff, I count myself lucky. I dabbled with pretty much everything, and I didn't get hooked on anything other than alcohol at the time. And man, that road could have gone it could have gone in so many different other paths. And many of my friends and many of the friends and my brothers and sisters in recovery, obviously we all have different stories. But for me, yeah, it was mainly booze, man. And so 19 years old, first time in the rooms, I popped into the rooms for about 3-4 months, went to meetings, found out that, convinced myself that I was terminally unique and didn't fit the rooms and it wasn't for me. And I'm going to go back out because I'm only 19 and I've got way more partying to do. So come on. Yeah.
Right. You're too young for all this, right? Yeah. All right. You gave it a little look. I'm glad, you checked in some of this stuff. All right. You get some education on it, but you're 19, you'll figure this all out. And it's certainly not going to be in these rooms. Right. And like you, Aaron, booze, alcohol is by far my number one thing. And I found a whole lot of other stuff too. And one thing I do mention is cocaine. Cocaine let me drink longer. I was one of the last ones out of my kind of circle to kind of find cocaine. When I did, it let me drink more. And I would wake up the next day, I kind of hate it. And I saw cocaine as a young kid from, other stuff from father and stuff. So I actually didn't like I just hated what cocaine was. But of course, as an addict and an alcoholic, when it came and when I found it, it was, it was pedal to the metal and it was do it all and call the guy. But the next day, I justified it like, oh, I'm not the guy calling I'm not calling him, someone else will find it. And I would go out literally and say, yeah, I'm just going to drink tonight. And then, after a couple cocktails, a couple of drinks, a couple of beers, I'm like, call the guy. And, that's how I rolled. So, what I'm saying in a roundabout way is I was a full-blown alcoholic and alcohol is my thing. And yes, cocaine and some other things let me drink more. And so, but I don't know if I would actually say I was hooked on it, but I did like it though. So I don't know. Maybe it was. Maybe if a doctor could probably tell you, but who knows? So here you are. You're 19, you're a young man, you get a little education in the rooms of AA and recovery, but you're not ready and you go back out. Where do you go?
Yeah, I go back out. I live in Toronto for a couple more years and then that sort of wraps up and I decide to move back to Vancouver. Basically at this time in my life and throughout most of my 20s, I'm bouncing around looking for a place to be me. And of course, it doesn't have anything to do with where I am physically. It has to do with where I am mentally and emotionally. Gary, just to touch on what you're saying about Coke there, I used to call cocaine drinking steroids because, for real. Because I like you, man, my DOC was like booze, hardcore. I was a booze hound. I wanted alcohol. That was my thing. And if there was a drug that would allow me to drink more alcohol, well, then that's good too, because that's gonna, Yeah, man. So I didn't get heavily into it, but at the same time, later in my drinking career, when I was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, which you and I spoke about off camera there earlier, I was prescribed with stimulant meds. And I'm an addict. I'm an alcoholic, and I know how to manipulate systems to get more of something I want, especially when it's a drug. Very shortly after I was diagnosed, I was up to the strongest stuff at the highest possible freaking dose my doctor could give me. And what was I using it for? I was using it for drinking steroids. I was using it to lift me up or pop me out of when I was getting to this during the day. I would be taking my meds to get me back to a baseline that I could fake it throughout the day until I was able to get home and to a safe place, which was this cave I created basically. Where I'd just go and be alone. But yeah, so moved back to Vancouver and stayed in the restaurant business. I started working at the Keg, actually Keg Restaurants Limited. It's a big Canadian company. There's Kegs in the States too, I think. But I worked for the corporate Keg and I was a manager with them for about 7 years and moved up through the ranks and worked at the bigger and bigger restaurants until I was on an opening team for their flagship stores. So, everything I did had to have this piece that allowed me to be the alcoholic in practice that I was at the time. And I could hide in that industry quite well. So
that's your livelihood on top of it, right? You're a professional partier, that's clear. And your profession is you're opening restaurants as well. So, there's a lot that goes with it. And then I get it. Like I said, I was a bartender too. I completely get everything where you come from, and it's all of it is resonating, and I can relate to it.
Yeah.
You're with this company for 7 years, and
Mhm.
this is what you do for a living. Start telling us when you get to recovery.
So within that 7 years, I was sober for two. And I actually went back to the rooms again when I was 24-ish this time around, and got a couple years of sobriety. And I was like, okay, this is good, but still working at the keg, still hanging out with the same people, still going to bars, still hanging out with the same friends and all that, still doing the same thing, just going to meetings and, white knuckling it essentially. But again, Gary, I was able to convince my addiction, convinced me that I was going to be okay. 2 years was enough. I just needed to reset and I could get back out and it would be different this time. Of course, it wasn't. We know, Gary, that addiction is a progressive disease. Every time we go back out, it's going to get worse. And I know that. I believe that 100% full-heartedly because I've gone in and out 4 times. And honestly, every single time I went out, got worse. Yeah, so I cleaned up for a couple of years at the keg, decided that wasn't for me, went back in, continued going on. On the outside, and this is just the most important point I can make about my own journey, is on the outside, I was so good at being that chameleon of fitting in absolutely everywhere. I could fit into a party atmosphere, but I could also put on a suit and tie and sit down with a bunch of execs and do that. Or I could freaking throw a tank top on and go, throw my Birkenstocks on and go play hacky sack with the hippies at the beach. Like I just could fit in and that's the way it was. And that's how I got away with being in my addiction so thoroughly for such a long period of my life and keeping it secret to most people around me. Like I said, if you got close enough, you could see it. I didn't let anybody get close enough.
Right. I get that. I'm a little different in that sense. I was the last person to realize I had which is dumbfounding to even say out loud, but I was the last person to realize. I just didn't realize what alcoholism is. I didn't know what an alcoholic was. Everyone around me knew that I had a problem with drinking. Everyone. Yeah. I was the last person to see it completely. I could fit in too. You're mentioning these circles, right? Like I would love to play, hacky sack with the hippies too. Like I got fish up here. I've been to, I don't even know how many fish shows, and now I go see fish sober and, life is so much better. I thought my life was over. I was 26 when I went to my first meeting. I went to rehab and I thought my life was over and my identity was gone. And all my buddies, my best friends from kindergarten on, I'm probably going to lose them because, this is what we did, even though I did it a little bit different than all of them put together. They know how to have fun too. Yeah, they do. They do, for sure. But I did it a little bit differently always. And, how am I going to further my career? There's no way I'm going to be able to further my career if I can't kind of entertain. It's who I am. Like this is, if people like me, they like that fun Gary, even though I'd be the fun, happiest guy in the place and a drop of a dime, I could be the nastiest guy in a place, like in a heartbeat. And that's just the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde of this being. And we see it a lot in the rooms, but I say that a lot that I thought my life was over and little did I know it was just getting started. So here you are, you're battling, you're really in the fight, right? You're in and out because that's a tough place to be. You all know the saying, I'll say it again, a belly full of booze and a head full of AA is a very difficult place to be.
Yeah. And I spent, like if you count from the first time I went to AA when I was 19 to the time I got sober, which I was 43, I spent 24 years with a belly full of booze and a mind full of AA. And I killed myself mentally because of that. Emotionally, spiritually, I destroyed the man I am today because I was so fucking upset and discouraged and shameful. And, I was full of hate and loathing by the end, man. Yeah. Like I literally had periods where, and I'm not proud of a lot, man, but you know what? It's okay. It's in my past, but like, I couldn't barely even look in a mirror. I smashed mirrors a few times because of my face looking back at me from them, like bathroom mirrors, because of my face looking back at me. Nobody else or even around, just me communicating with myself and so much loathing and hate that I'm just, blow that mirror up so I don't have to look.
I totally get that. My mother-in-law, who's an amazing woman, and she's a civilian, she's not one of us at all, but she had said this years ago and it had nothing to do with recovery, but she said, you got to be able to pass the mirror test. And the mirror test is looking yourself in the mirror like you're okay. with who you are and, what you're doing. And you bring up another point about the shame. I say this kind of repetitively as well. I get this instant sense of gratitude sincerely every time the phone rings, Aaron, because I can pick that phone up right now. There was so many years, even after I got sober, for years, that when the phone rang, I had that anxiety and that fear, even when I know I wasn't out the night before that, but I was so programmed to have that fear when the phone rang, of who's calling me, what did I do the night before, who's chasing me, am I in trouble, who do I like, all of it. But today, and it's such a little, it sounds so small, but it's so kind of profound at the same time. Like, I, honest to God, when the phone rings, I feel really quick in my gut, I'm so happy I can answer this phone right now.
Isn't that incredible, eh? Like you think about those little tiny bits of life that most people and even us, like, it's so easy to take them for granted. It's so easy to not even realize that there's something special,
Absolutely.
And it's just answering your phone and having that tiny moment of gratitude and just self-assurance and reassurance, just feeling good about yourself that, yeah, I can answer this call. Because I was the exact same as you, Gary. When I walked into Cedars at Cobble Hill, that's where I went for treatment. It's a place in Vancouver Island. I almost started, saying a lot of great things about them. And then I was like, you know what? They are great, but I'm not here to promote them. So
no, I get that. Totally get that.
But when I went into Cedars and I was able to give my phone away, because you're not allowed to have your phone, Right. I was in there for 56 days. I basically threw my phone across the counter when I walked in. I was like, I don't want to look at this again. Like, I was just like, take it. Yeah. I was full of fear, man. Even dealing with talking to family during like scheduled phone calls and stuff. I wanted my therapist with me at all times. I did not feel comfortable with any form of communication. By that point, when I walked into treatment, I shut down all my doors and I was just like, I'm in treatment. It's in here or it's death. And, I've got a reel about that, but that's the absolute truth. I was at a stage where I was fully convinced, and I still am, that if I hadn't gone in there, I wouldn't be sitting here with you today, Gary. That's the reality of it. I was this close, man. I was at the end.
I get that. And, you're answering a question I was just going to bring up. I was going to ask you, what changed this time? What was the difference? And without me asking it, you're clearly telling it. I mentioned this too recently is I mentioned, like, I thought I was going to lose all my pals, all my best buddies. And I was sober about 10 years and I never addressed it with them. They're totally supportive. I'm in a chat with every single one of them right now. I talk to them, multiple times a day. They're a great group of guys, but I brought it up with them like 10 years into sobriety. And I was like, I never really talked to you guys. Like, what did you think when I went to rehab? And what did you think when I stopped drinking? And they all looked at each other and they said, Gary, we thought you were going to die. We all talked about this. We were convinced that you were going to die. And I was like, really? And I was struggling at this time. Like, I think I was wavering, I wasn't working a really good program. And I think I was kind of, I don't know, I was definitely a little squirrely, but when they had said that to me, I'm going to stay in here I'm going to keep, I'm going to stay in this program. I'm not going to do any more experimenting because, these guys, like I said, they're, great group of guys. They're not angels. They know how to have some fun too. And for them to tell me that flat out and to all look around each other, disgusted, I was like, because I can have a built-in forgetter, Aaron, right? Like 17 years, right? It's a lot of time. And I do say it a lot, but the truth is I can ask, the disease, you said it before, that the disease will tell me, how bad was it, Gary? Like, were you really that bad? You're a different person now. Like, don't you think you can handle this now? Like I'll still have those moments, but I am blessed with the gift of, I know, and you had said it, and you said it so eloquently about this disease of awful progression, and it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And I have it in my head, and this is just in my head, that, if I went outside and had a beer right now, like, maybe I'd be okay, and maybe tomorrow I'd be okay, but there would be a time, and it would be a lot faster than I think it will be. I will be right back to where I was and worse, where I was 17 plus years ago.
Totally. I completely agree. And you just nailed it. Worse. When I went back out before, I'm going to jump back a little. In my late 30s, I had 3 more years of sobriety. And so I had a couple years in my 20s. I had a few months when I was 19, a couple years in my 20s. In my late 30s, I put together 3 years. And it seemed like it was okay. I went to meetings for a year and then I stopped doing any recovery work. I just lived, but I didn't drink.
Right.
But the thing is, I didn't deal with any of the mental health issues that were underneath my drinking during those 3 years. And I did exactly what you were just talking about. That voice started in my head, convincing myself it was going to be different. I could be different. I could go back out. Maybe I could have one beer here and there and I'd be good to go. And so I did. I tried. I went back out and I had one beer. And that beer I had was in August. I can't remember what year it was, but I do remember it was in August. And by September, October of that year, I was hiding booze around the house and in my car.
Yeah.
2 months. After 3 years of sobriety, it took me 2 months to actually be day drinking and hiding my alcohol. And it came back like a ton of bricks, and I don't have another relapse in me.
Yeah.
Because if it gets worse and what I experienced before I went to treatment is going to get worse, well, I barely made it out of there alive, man.
Right.
So when I went back in, when I decided to actually go to treatment for the first time and the only time, which is, where we're at now. But when I went in, I actually was sat at a rock bottom for about 12 months before going in. And I know, it was a long time, but I really was. About 12 months before I went to rehab, I actually planned to take my own life. I made a plan and I put it into motion. And the reason I didn't go through is because I actually left my wallet at home and I couldn't buy the materials that I needed. I had $20 on me and I had enough money to buy a bottle of booze, which I needed to get it done, or the materials. And of course, the alcohol won. So that day, addiction actually kind of saved my life in a weird, twisted, messed up, black way. Yep. I bought the alcohol. And I remember sitting in this field. It was winter and it was night. And it was, the prairies are very open and vast. It's wide open. And I was sitting alone in a field at night with snow around me, drinking in my vehicle and smoking cigarettes. And I just felt so absolutely tormented. I sat there, it was cathartic. I was bawling my eyes out by myself for hours. And something compelled me to leave that field and come back to my house. And when I came home, I was drunk and I stank and I was cathartically crying still. But I read a story to my 3 boys that night. And my youngest was only an infant at the time. And my 2 older ones were, in their 4 or 6 age range. I read them a story. And for some reason that experience gave me this overwhelming will to live. And I don't know, that's all I had. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew I wanted to live. And the next morning I woke up and I was still fully in addiction, 100% in active addiction. But I was like, I need to figure this out. I need to get out of this somehow. So for an entire year, I searched for what was going to work for me. I went back to AA. This time I couldn't even string together 3-4 days. I'd never had that before. Every other time I'd walked into the meeting rooms, I was able to string together months, maybe a year right off the bat. This time I couldn't even put 2 days together. I was an absolute mess. So it took me a full year to figure out what I really needed to do in order to actually move ahead with my own life and not die.
Amazing. I'm sorry, but higher power is just pouring through your message here, right? God leaves your wallet at home for one time. Maybe booze does help us because you spend your last $20 on a bottle of booze and you don't go through with your plan. And man, when you're in a place of writing out a plan to do what you were contemplating, right? That's where alcoholism and addiction, that's where it takes us, right? You hear this so often, myself too, that sometimes we can't put a full finger on like what happened, but you come home and you read that story to your boys and you are overcome with this feeling of, I want to live.
Yeah. And
I will say also that you go back to AA, which you have plenty of practice at, and this time you're given the gift of this isn't working. Like who knows what would happen if you got sober for a month or 3 months or 6 months, I would venture to say maybe you're not here, I don't mean you're not alive. I mean, you're not sober right now, probably, probably not doing as well as you're doing right now. That's for certain, I would say, right? So you're given this other gift of, I need to find something else too. I need to find something more powerful to get me sober. And so where do you go from here?
Yeah. So I started asking. I actually went to my doctor. I don't know. There was like a fire under my butt, man. Like I started like actively looking. So I found out about outpatient detox within here in town, outpatient treatment. I went into an outpatient detox program here where I was basically given a vial of Valium and sent home and like take 2 a day until you're off. And I was like, woohoo, now I got a vial of Valium. I just drank all week and popped Valium. So that didn't work for me. But, like I tried every single different thing I could possibly do in community. And then it reached a point where I was connected with a woman here in town who actually used to be an anesthesiologist. So she was a physician and in recovery now. And that is recovers out open with her own story. And I started speaking with her. My doctor gave me her name. I just called her out of the blue and she started speaking with me every day and suggesting different things. And then she suggested, treatment. By the time I actually reached the point where I was ready to go to treatment, I knew I needed the most intense, like immersed therapeutic experience I could possibly be exposed to. I knew that there was nothing else for me. I needed to walk completely away from life. I needed to drop everything. I needed to strip myself down to my bare essentials and start fresh because I had nothing else that I could put in that pile at that time. Right. So
amazing. So what year, where are we? Like, where's as far as the time frame, what year and things are?
Yeah, sorry. So that was 2020 that I was actually searching for a way out. And in 2021, on February 24th, 2021, I walked through the gates of, oh man.
Yeah. It's okay, man.
I wasn't expecting that. I talk about this a lot, Gary.
What? It's
wow.
okay.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's
great.
I walked through the rooms. I walked in through the gates of treatment on February 24th, 2021. And my life has never been the same since, brother.
No, it hasn't, brother. It hasn't. And it's oozing through you, man. I'm giving you a big, giant virtual hug right now. I mean that sincerely. You can get me choked up too, brother. Like, right? Our lives get saved.
Yeah.
You know?
And it was.
Yeah, it was. And so from here, and I love I love how you just, right? You said earlier you throw your phone, like you strip down to your bare essentials, right? And you start listening. And for the first time, you kind of just turn everything over.
Yeah.
Your higher power, you turn it over. Maybe your higher power at this point is the treatment center, which I've done, early on, like just make the meeting your higher power. I did that for a while. Yeah. And so you start, you're there, you're in this amazing place, and you very slowly, even though we were the last to see it, you slowly start to begin the healing process, and you start to get better, right? Yeah. And that's February of 2021, and we're not too much longer. We're in 2023. How do you get to a place? Talk us how you get to this place where you are now, where you're recovering out loud, because now you're helping people every single day, Aaron.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I'm so grateful to be even able to be here, and I'm even more grateful that I'm able to just share my message and that it's being received. When I walked into treatment, I was and I mean, you can see the emotion on my face when I even mentioned walking through the gate, but I was so ready. I wanted it so bad. I was so broken. I was so just absolutely at the end of my rope. And I knew I wanted to live, but I didn't know how. And I walked in there just an absolute shell of a man. And like I said, I'm ready for anything. And it was like a wick was lit on me, Gary. It was like it just took off like wildfire. The moment I walked in there, after I got through the actual detox, so that my detox was rough too, man. And I was having night terrors and I have PTSD as well. So like that was actually diagnosed shortly thereafter. I didn't know about it at the time, but that all was going on at the same time. So once I got through that first 10 days of detox in treatment there, it was like a light switch flipped. I just opened my mouth and words started pouring out. I started making associations, and the biggest association I possibly could make, and that I was so proud, I was able to reintroduce my brain with my heart and my soul. And that was incredible because I walked in there, I could think and speak with my brain, but I had no idea where my heart was, and I had no idea what my soul needed, and I was just all over the map. And throughout this entire process, I was able to put the pieces of me back together, and maybe together for the first time as an adult.
Sure.
I've never lived as an adult outside of addiction, ever.
Yeah.
Like ever. So it was like it took off, and I just soaked it in. I just read and started talking, and I just couldn't put the pen down, was writing, and it just continued. But this burning desire to share my story came through while I was in treatment, of just wanting to share as much and as loudly as humanly possible, Gary. And that's why I'm here today, for sure.
That's a beautiful thing. It really is. Not only you're helping people with your message and your content that you're putting out all the time, you're lessening the stigma every single time we recover out loud, right? Because, and I hate that word, I know it's a lot better, the stigma, right? But it's still such a, there's still so much people don't understand about addiction. And you mentioned soul so many times.
Yeah.
People that haven't suffered addiction or alcoholism, like they can't understand the soul sickness and the internal chaos and the lowering or lessening of morals that each time we get a little bit worse and worse. And you talk about bottoms and talk about myself, like there is, and this was actually, I heard this for the first time in that rehab, and I always believed it because I've lived it, is that if you think there's a rock bottom, there is always a lower bottom. You can always go lower. And I could put my finger on the word fear on so many things, but there's some, for me, that is a healthy fear. I have a healthy fear of knowing that if I go back out, that all bets are off and everything that I have and am is going to be gone, and it's going to be gone soon. So that's a healthy fear. But to have that, to know that, you mentioned the progression earlier, like that's another thing civilians, I like to say, they can't really get their head around. And you hear cunning, baffling, and powerful. Like I had the baffling part down pat from everyone around me from the word go, from 16 years old. Like I baffled everyone around me. But then as it got darker and I got older and my progression increased, it got dark. And so I couldn't stop. And that's when it becomes cunning. And that's when it's powerful. At least that's for me. And all in a nutshell. And your whole entire story is cunning, baffling, and powerful. But now the powerful part is how you're here to recover out loud, which is a term I'm relatively new to be honest with you, which I love. And I've been saying it a lot for the past few months, but you're here to help people now, right? So, God kept that. God had you, your higher power, whatever you call them. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Had you read that letter, read the book to your boys and have the newfound purpose that you wanted to be here. And now there's a reason, obviously. And there's, it wasn't ready. Your time wasn't ready. This is your time. Now it seems you've certainly finding your purpose here.
I think so. I feel I'm comfortable in the seat. I shouldn't say I think so. I know so.
Right.
I feel it. I'm confident of it. It's here. And this purpose, wherever it came from, and higher power, God, creator, Mother Earth. I think it's great that people celebrate different avenues of spirituality to reach their higher power and what name they use. If it's God, then it's God. It's God of your understanding. It's God of my understanding. That's totally cool. So but I appreciate that. But you mentioned something here just a second ago, and I wanted to touch on it, and I completely forget what it was. So I'm not going to.
Well, maybe it'll pop back up. Maybe it'll pop back up. So, but Aaron, so where can we find you and follow your journey? Where is the best place to find you these days?
Awesome. Right now, the best place to find me is on Facebook on Detox Junkie. It's I'm the only one out there. Detox Junkie. Come see me. I'm posting every day, making reels, talking about my own recovery. The people that are actually part of the following and the audience and the world is such an inspiration for me. The feedback I get from my posts and from my reels and from my memes and from these conversations is what really keeps me going, Gary. But yeah, Detox Junkie on Facebook. I have a website popping up here soon. It's in the works. So that'll be detoxjunkie.ca.
Okay.
Then you can also find me on Instagram and on TikTok, but those platforms are just at their inception, so to speak, as far as my presence. Yeah,
you're just getting going across all of it, but I don't think I am certainly not worried about you. I know we're going to talk again in a few months, and you're already blowing up. I see the size of your audience on Facebook. I know you do I believe you do some meetings type stuff as well once in a while on Facebook, I believe I saw.
Yeah, I've done some meetings, actually not on Facebook. I've done some meetings over Zoom and that type of thing. And actually, that's another thing that I'm considering doing is putting together a possible like a 1 week detox junkie online Zoom group. So there's lots of irons in the fire, Gary. We're going to see where they all end up, but lots of good things. So
lots of great things, lots of beautiful things. Spiritual program. We found our spirituality, right? And spirituality to me is helping another person. That's because it's really in the giving is where we take ourselves out of our own self and we get to help someone else, like I said at the beginning off camera, and I'm repeating myself, but I just want to help one person today. And I know you're going to help a lot of people, and I know this is going to come through and you're going to help more than one person today. We're going to put all of your details in the show notes, and everyone's going to be able to find you. And I say this too, I try not to repeat myself, but I'm big in keeping relationships going, and you're just too easy to want to stay in touch with. So I look forward to you and I really being, it's a gift to be side by side in the same team with you in this and to stay in touch.
I feel the exact same, Gary. It's been such a pleasure having a conversation with you. Thank you so much for reaching out to me and asking me on the show today. I'm super honored to be here. And you're killing it, man. I love what you're doing and getting out there on so many platforms and being so accessible is just awesome to see. I mean, when I searched you up, it was like I can listen to you wherever and whenever and on anything. So I think that's fantastic and super encouraging, man. Yeah, we'll be doing things together for sure.
Absolutely. And that means the world to me. I appreciate all what you just said. I really do. And I look forward to staying in touch with you, and good luck with everything, but we're going to, we'll help each other out everywhere we can. And like I said, there can't be too many of us, right?
Not at all. We need more of us to really beat up that stigma and beat up that judgment we talked about and change the way that perception is of addiction.
Yep.
We need more people talking.
Yeah, we're in the fight, man. We are in the fight. And it kind of just happened. Like I said, I didn't come here to join the fight, but now I'm in it. Now let's go.
Yeah, we're in it. Let's go.
Let's go, man. All right. Appreciate so much. What an amazing, powerful message you have, and you're going to kill it, but I'm so happy for you. And it was really great to have you today.
Thank you so much, Gary. Big virtual hug to you, man.
Yeah, right back at you, bud.
Have an awesome day.
You do the same. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another powerful episode of the Begin Again podcast. We sincerely appreciate your time and support. We hope that today's conversation has ignited a spark within you, affirming that recovery is not only attainable, but can also be a wellspring of strength and resilience. Our ultimate goal is to make a difference in someone's life every single day. By sharing these stories of redemption, we strive to empower you and inspire you to unlock your fullest potential, facilitate positive transformations, and contribute to creating a better future for yourself, for your loved ones, and the world at large. If you know someone who could benefit from listening to our show, please share it with them. And if you resonate with our mission and feel compelled to do so, we would greatly appreciate your support through a 5-star review, following us on Instagram, and subscribing to our YouTube channel, The Begin Again Podcast. The more positive reviews we receive and the wider our message spreads, the greater our collective ability to help others realize that change is possible in their own lives. Thank you once again for being a part of our community. May you be blessed on your own journey of personal growth and transformation.